Imagine boarding a plane. You settle into your seat. The engines hum. The runway lights blur past, and then you're in the air. You're flying. Now imagine that plane, carrying 239 souls, simply vanishes. No mayday call, no wreckage trail, no goodbye. Just silence. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, the greatest aviation mystery the world has ever known. And to this day, more than a decade later, no one has been able to fully explain what happened. Stay with me, because the deeper we go into this story, the stranger it becomes. It is the 7th of March, 2014. The Kuala Lumpur International Airport buzzes with its usual midnight energy. Departures and arrivals, tired travelers, bright screens, routine. At gate C28, passengers board a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the safest, most reliable commercial aircraft ever built. Its registration, 9M-MRO. Its destination, Beijing Capital International Airport, China. Its scheduled flight time, approximately 5.5 hours. 227 passengers settle in for the overnight journey. Business travelers, families, a group of 153 Chinese nationals, 2 young Iranian men traveling on stolen passports, artists, engineers, a renowned calligrapher and his wife. 12 crew members take their positions. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, a veteran pilot with over 18,000 hours of flight experience. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, 27, relatively new to the 777 but qualified and capable. At 12:42 in the morning on March 8th, the aircraft pushes back from the gate. Everything is normal. Everything is textbook. At 12:46 a.m., MH370 takes off into the warm Malaysian night. 38 minutes pass. The plane crosses into Vietnamese airspace. Malaysian air traffic control calls the cockpit. The response, calm and unhurried, comes from what investigators believe is Captain Zahari's voice. Malaysia 370, good night. That is the last spoken communication the world would ever receive from Flight 370. 2 minutes later, the plane's transponder, the device that broadcasts the aircraft's position to civilian radar, goes dark. At 1:21 a.m., Flight 370 disappears from air traffic control screens entirely. But here is where things begin to unravel. While civilian radar lost the plane, the Malaysian military's primary radar system did not. For the next hour, military radar quietly tracked an unidentified aircraft, later confirmed to be MH370, as it made a dramatic, deliberate turn. Not the gentle correction of a plane blown off course, a full 180-degree reversal. Back across the Malay Peninsula, back the way it came, and then northwest, up along the Strait of Malacca. Whoever was in control of that airplane was flying it away from China, away from its planned route, away from every radar station that might see it clearly. At 2:22 a.m., the plane exits Malaysian military radar range, approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang Island. After that, there is nothing. No visual sighting, no radio contact, no distress signal, no debris field left behind. It simply vanishes into the dark. The passengers' families wait at Beijing Capital Airport. Minutes become hours. Hours become agony. Malaysian Airlines officials struggle to explain what they cannot explain. At 7:24 in the morning, the airline officially declares the flight missing. A search is launched. Ships comb the South China Sea, planes scan the horizon, governments mobilize. But they are looking in entirely the wrong place. Here is the detail that changed everything, and that no one initially considered significant. Every hour, like clockwork, Flight 370's onboard satellite communication system sent out a routine automated signal to an Inmarsat satellite hovering 35,000 kilometers above the Indian Ocean. These signals, called handshakes, weren't transmitting data. They were simply the plane saying electronically, "I'm still here." Analysts at Inmarsat, working through a method that had never been used before in aviation investigation, were able to extract something extraordinary from these handshakes. The Doppler shift of the signal, the subtle change in frequency that reveals whether a transmitter is moving toward or away from the satellite. The math was painstaking. The process took weeks. But when it was done, a conclusion emerged that stunned the world. MH370 had not turned north toward Central Asia. It had turned south, far south, deep into one of the most remote, hostile, and inaccessible stretches of ocean on the face of the Earth, the southern Indian Ocean. For 7 hours after its last radar contact, the plane had continued flying, its engines burning. Its passengers, we can only imagine what they knew, or didn't know, inside. The final handshake came at 8:19 a.m., 7.5 hours after takeoff. After that, one final, partial signal, a fragment. Investigators would later call it a log-on request, suggesting the plane's satellite system may have rebooted, possibly because an engine had just failed. The fuel would have been exhausted. The aircraft, somewhere in the vast southern Indian Ocean, would have begun its final descent. What followed was the most expensive, most technologically sophisticated, and most heartbreaking search operation in the history of aviation. 26 nations participated. The search initially focused on the South China Sea and Andaman Sea, and found nothing, because the plane wasn't there. When the Inmarsat analysis redirected the search to the southern Indian Ocean, ships equipped with underwater acoustic sensors were deployed to listen for the plane's black box pinger, a device designed to emit a signal for 30 days after impact. Crews thought they heard something promising in April 2014. Autonomous submarines were sent to investigate. Weeks of scanning the ocean floor revealed nothing. The search zone shifted. It was recalculated. It shifted again. Over the following 3 years, search vessels mapped more than 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor in extraordinary detail, discovering underwater mountains, ancient volcanoes, and geological formations no human eye had ever seen. But no plane. In January 2017, with no aircraft found and funds exhausted, the Joint Agency Coordination Center, the body overseeing the multinational search, suspended its operations. In January 2018, a private company called Ocean Infinity launched a second search, using a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles to cover vast areas simultaneously. After 6 months, they too found nothing. The contract expired. The search ended. Somewhere beneath those dark, freezing waters, the plane is still there, waiting. But the ocean, it turns out, was not entirely silent. On July 29, 2015, nearly 500 days after the disappearance, a piece of aircraft wing washed ashore on the island of Reunion, more than 4,000 kilometers from the primary search area. Analysis confirmed it was a flaperon, a movable section of the wing, from a Boeing 777. Further testing confirmed what many already suspected. It came from 9M-MRO. It came from MH370. This was the first physical proof that the aircraft had indeed gone down in the Indian Ocean. Over the following months, more debris emerged, washed up on beaches in Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, Madagascar. A piece of horizontal stabilizer, cabin interior panels, part of a seat cushion, a section of the plane's right wing. Some pieces bore what appeared to be barnacle growth and biological evidence consistent with long ocean drift. Oceanographic models, working backward from where the pieces had been found, attempted to narrow the search zone. But the ocean is vast and merciless, and the math only points to a region, not a coordinate. The fuselage, the cockpit, the flight recorders, they remain on the ocean floor, silent and undiscovered. So what happened? This is the question that has consumed investigators, aviation experts, families of victims, and theorists around the world for over a decade. And the honest answer, as uncomfortable as it is, remains. We don't know. But we can walk through what investigators have considered. One of the earliest theories centered on a sudden catastrophic event, a rapid depressurization, a fire, a structural failure. But a catastrophic event doesn't explain the deliberate turn. Planes that suffer sudden emergencies don't smoothly reverse course and navigate waypoints. The Malaysian government, early in the investigation, revealed that the turnback was a deliberate, manually programmed maneuver. Someone in that cockpit, at some point before the transponder went dark, had entered the new course. This opened the door to darker possibilities. Investigators examined every passenger manifest. They looked at financial records, personal histories, political affiliations. They found no clear suspect. The two Iranian men traveling on stolen passports were investigated intensively and cleared. They were asylum seekers, not terrorists. Attention turned to the flight crew. Captain Zahari's home flight simulator, a personal custom-built unit in his house, was recovered by investigators. Deleted flight simulation data was partially reconstructed, and it showed that someone had practiced flying a route over the southern Indian Ocean, with fuel loads consistent with a long flight, and then landing at a remote runway, before deleting the files. Investigators could not conclusively attribute the simulation to the captain's intent. Pilots routinely practice unusual routes on home simulators. The deletion could have been routine, or it could have been something else entirely. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, which led the search, later suggested that a hypoxia event, a loss of cabin pressure that slowly incapacitated the crew and passengers, might explain the aircraft flying on autopilot without human intervention for hours. But hypoxia does not explain the deliberate turn. The Malaysian Ministry of Transport's final report, released in July 2018, ran to almost 500 pages and reached no definitive conclusion. It noted that the aircraft's controls had been deliberately manipulated, but could not determine by whom or why. It highlighted the failures of Malaysian air traffic control to respond quickly. It documented the breakdown in communication between Malaysian and Vietnamese controllers as the handover was missed. The report closed the official investigation without an answer. Behind every statistic and every theory, there are human beings whose lives were shattered and never reassembled. 227 passengers, 12 crew, each one someone's child, parent, sibling, partner. Many of the families, particularly from China, where the largest contingent of passengers originated, formed advocacy groups. They demanded more transparency. They accused the Malaysian government of withholding information. Some hired independent lawyers. Some commissioned their own technical analyses. Some still refuse to accept that their loved ones are gone, because without a confirmed crash site, without remains, without a single definitive explanation, how can they? They are suspended in a grief that has no endpoint, no closure, no grave to visit, only an ocean. Grace Nathan, whose mother was on the flight, became one of the most visible and vocal voices for the families. She and others like her have kept the pressure alive, year after year, demanding that the search be resumed. In 2024, the Malaysian government announced that a new search agreement was being finalized with Ocean Infinity, who had offered to conduct another search on a no-find, no-fee basis. Whether that search will succeed where all others have failed remains to be seen. The families wait. Still, MH370 did not disappear without leaving a mark on the world. In its wake, aviation authorities worldwide implemented a series of changes that had never seemed necessary before, because nothing like this had ever happened before. The battery life on underwater locator beacons, the devices that help rescuers find black boxes, was extended from 30 days to 90. Flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders are now required to retain longer recordings. New standards for position reporting over open ocean were introduced, requiring aircraft to transmit their location far more frequently, so that no plane can ever again simply disappear from the planet's awareness for hours without anyone noticing. Global aviation authorities began implementing real-time aircraft tracking systems, a patchwork of satellite technology and ADS-B transponders that makes it far harder for an aircraft to go dark the way MH370 did. An entire industry of ocean search technology was advanced because of this one aircraft. The tools developed and refined in the hunt for MH370, long-range autonomous underwater vehicles, deep-sea sonar mapping, oceanographic drift modeling, have since been applied to other searches, other disasters. The loss of 239 lives changed how the world tracks its planes. Somewhere, in the cold darkness of the southern Indian Ocean, the wreckage of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 rests on the ocean floor. The black boxes sit silent, their batteries long dead. The fuselage, broken and buried, holds whatever answers it holds, if it holds any at all. The sea has not given it up, and so the questions remain. Who turned that plane around? Why? What did the passengers experience in those dark final hours? Were they conscious? Were they afraid? Did they even know? We live in an age of satellites and sensors and constant surveillance. We carry tracking devices in our pockets. We are, most of us, findable at any moment. The idea that a wide-body commercial jet carrying 239 people could simply vanish from the modern world feels impossible. And yet. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off on the 8th of March, 2014. It has not been found. It is widely regarded as the greatest mystery in aviation history, and it remains, to this day, the single deadliest case of aircraft disappearance in the history of human flight. Somewhere in the dark water, the answer waits. We just haven't found it yet.